Today we have on the show Kelvyn James, author of Walking Out of the Dark and creator of the international charity Wellness Walks. Um, Already we're bonding together about UK weather and this crazy weather we have in just outside of Toronto. We're dealing with wildfires 3,000 kilometers north of us that are giving us a reason to smoke. Um,
Wow.
how's your mental health, Kelvyn?
Good. Good. I mean, I feel like anybody, I'm a little bit affected by the weather, so this puts a smile on your face if you're British at the moment.
Beautiful. Let's jump right in. There's so much we have to talk about.
Go for
And
it.
I'm so happy that we found each other on LinkedIn. You're
Yep.
like my and I a lot of people just talk about LinkedIn about getting jobs, but it's more so about meeting professionals and people that are in your, I guess, wheelhouse.
Yeah.
Have you had this discovery as well with LinkedIn?
So I have a love-hate relationship with social media. Yeah, I'm aware it's a thing you have to do for the charity in today's world.
Okay.
Um, but most social media I struggle with. LinkedIn I really enjoy because people tell you who they are. You see it. I know I'm not dealing with bots. Um, and it tends
Yeah,
to be a little bit
there's really
more.
no doom scrolling as well.
Yeah, yeah, very much that. It's got I like the selection, and I think also it was my last social media, if that makes sense. So probably like a lot of folks, I've let people into my social media who aren't actually friends, and I have this thing on Facebook now where I never know any of the birthdays. I look at this list of birthdays, I don't know these people. I've never met these people. So LinkedIn, even if I don't know them, I know what they're about, like yourself. So
Yeah,
I actually find it a really positive space, and we've had some great help for the charity from it.
wonderful.
Yeah,
Let's get into your bio a little bit. You begin your bio with a being a child of an abusive home and a survivor. I'm not going to call you a survivor anymore. I've been called that myself, but it's not no longer survivor, Kelvyn. It's warrior. That's what we deal with
yeah.
now, as opposed to surviving. What did survival look like to young Kelvyn James?
Um, well, I don't want this to be an advert for the book, but the book made me
Oh,
look
advert
back a lot,
away.
and it made me look back and think about things. And I think survival on some level, you don't know you're doing it at the time,
Hmm.
because you are lit. There are times where your hands are just over your head and you try not to get hit. But for me, it was flying, and it became escape, and that's become one of my theories of life. Of if I couldn't tolerate this, how did I put myself somewhere else? And eventually, that for me became going to the mountains and physically being somewhere else. But as a small child, it was covering my heads and trying to think of when I'd get back to the farm and my grandparents. So I refer to that as flying. Um, and yeah, I think that's how I coped. If I'm honest.
Wild. Um, so yeah, and as a child, not knowing what you know now, if you were to walk in or have a child close, see yourself as a child, what type of advice would you give him now before we unpack walking out of the dark, wellness walks, your mother's murder, all this kind of crazy stuff that's happened that's driven you to become the Kelvyn James you are now? What would you tell that frightened little boy?
It gets better. Yeah, I
Wicked.
think that's, and I know a lot of people lose sight of that, and I know there will absolutely have been times I didn't think it would,
Mhm.
but it does, or maybe not. It gets better, but it can get better. It took me a long time to understand we're driving the ship. Other people will crash into us, shove us, they'll get in our way, they'll try and hold us back, but we are the sum of our choices. So it can get better by the choices we make. Um,
And I
yeah,
could see you thinking that from the top of a rock face as well.
yeah,
Or maybe
yeah.
not thinking anything and
Well,
letting the natural world take control. I bring that up
just
because Kelvin's a big mountain climber.
yeah, there is a bit of that, if I'm honest. Yeah, and again, I've written about it, which is me finding my way to understand it, because I didn't know I was writing a book for a long time. I was scribbling notes here and there to just try and keep track of my sanity. Um,
That's a really good line, actually. Writing to keep track of your sanity. Can I write that down?
yeah, by all means, that's yours. Take it. But yeah, there are moments on a rock face that last forever, and back in this world of dreams and make believe that they're seconds. But there were moments where I was absolutely empty and devoid of everything except that moment. And I think that's cathartic and draining. And that certainly gave me some of the strength to move on. And I know, there are amazing climbers who do amazing things on their own. But for me, climbing is about who I'm with and who I trust. So for a long time, I hid from the world in the mountains. And mountaineering will let you do that quite literally. But I think I began to heal, certainly in later life, when I started taking people with me again. Um, because you absolutely have to trust the person you're with, and trust hadn't necessarily been a big thing in my earlier life. So for me, that was very, very foundational of understanding that I hadn't had that beaten out of me. I could trust people again. I could be trustworthy again, especially around the time of losing my mum, because I spent a lot of time thinking I wasn't trustworthy. I thought I'd let my mum down. Couldn't see how other people would trust me, and then they literally put their life in my hands, um, and that's quite an amazing thing, really. Um, so yeah,
Absolutely. And you bring up like like that you just explained it, but I was like, what is your perception of life from atop a rock face? What is it about discovering your identity? It sounds so. I'm not that crazy. I'm not gonna. I'm. I vow. You know, self-preservation is an instinct I possess. So you won't. I might climb something where I know I won't die if I fall. But how does your perception change from a top when you get to the top of a mountain, or when you're having difficulty climbing?
um, so there is a part of me that I like the problem solving. Um, it is the manifestation of being in charge of your own destiny. It's only your decisions that are going to fix that. Sometimes, if I'm being spiritual, I quite like the fact that sometimes the mountain wins. And it took
Oh,
me a long
nice.
time to be able to say that, but sometimes I like the fact that I understand my place in the scheme of things. Um, but you know where you've been. So if you left your car 2 valleys away, you can't see it anymore. If you left your problems in down in the real world, you don't see it anymore. And you've literally overcome adversity. And they're not the same thing. But I think there is a big measure of, if I can do that, I can do this. And I do feel, I've got to tell you, Brandon, you wouldn't die if we took you into the mountains. We'd
Okay,
keep you
so
perfectly safe.
I'm coming to the UK. Is it Wales you're in there?
No, I'm just back from Wales. I'm in England in the Lake District, almost in Scotland, right on the border.
Okay. Okay,
Uh,
so I'm coming and we're gonna go climb.
yeah.
I have a date in New York City to get a manicure, and I have a date in England for a mountain climb.
Honestly, the rock face would do a manicure for you.
That's
We could
right.
file
Yeah,
those fingernails down.
that's right. Well, okay, let's stay with the mountains. How can you explain, and I know that this is something we brought up Zen, we brought up the idea of life being in your hands, but how can you explain the type of exhilaration you feel when you get to the top of a mountain?
Well, so
Or
yeah,
is there any
there's
explanation?
it's different things for different people. I think. There is there's the biological, there's the cortisol, the adrenaline, the satisfaction, that the hearing your heartbeat slow. For me, it's the sense of scale. The world can seem very small. If you're struggling with your mental health, the world can seem really small, literally the size of a skull. Um, and suddenly I get to climb these places where the world is vast and I can't see what's over the next corner. And if I stand far enough away when we're in the Alps, I can point at all the mountains and say, I've climbed that, I've climbed that, I've climbed that, I've climbed that. But actually, the
Wow.
truth is, there's a dozen ways up each of those mountains. And as an analogy for life, there's a dozen ways around most problems. Now, we quite often get stuck in a place where we think there's just one, but actually, if I just took Europe's most famous mountain, Mont Blanc, there are probably over 100 recognized routes to the top. You've climbed the mountain whichever which way you go, and some of them are really difficult, and some of them are still quite difficult. But there's different ways, and there's different beauty in each of it. And I think that understanding that the path is of your choosing, for me, I think that's a huge thing. And then standing on the top of something and thinking, there's so much more, because at the bottom of the mountain, all you can see is the mountain. At the top, there's so much more, and that's kind of one of
And
my theories of life.
you're a speck at that point in time.
Yeah,
In
yeah,
it's very humbling, isn't it?
yeah, yeah. And most of these in the modern world, you do. You're going to park your car somewhere. You might get on a tram, a lift, but yeah, you're going to start from civilization in one way, shape, or form or another, and then you might, if it's the greater ranges, walk for a long while, and you leave that behind. But you're still passing through little villages. But eventually, there comes a point where it's you and the mountain, and even if it's a really popular tourist mountain, which I have no snobbery about, and there are other people on the mountain with you at the same time, the only thing that's going to get you to the top is your feet, is your hands, is your endeavor and your perseverance.
It's up to you.
Yeah, that's hugely empowering.
All right, let's skip over. This is like I didn't know how to approach this, Kelvin, about your mother. I joke, and I know that's just there's no way around it. But I lost my mom in 2020 uh, to brain cancer, and I guided her from lung cancer that metastasized to the brain over a period of about 5 years, and so I call it I belong to the Dead Moms Club. And now guys our age or guys in my circle have to deal with being in the Dead Moms Club. And there's no dues to pay, there's no a membership card, there's no nothing. It's just that's it. How can you possibly explain, Kelvin, what you felt when you lost your mother?
Um, I can explain it now.
Yeah,
16 years
exactly.
later, I can
How many
put
years?
myself 16, I think. Yeah, and
16, okay.
there's a weird thing when I was writing the book. There was a chapter I just knew I didn't think was right. I thought everybody's going to struggle with this chapter called time traveling, but I can't explain the rest of the book if I don't write it. So it was 16 years ago, Brandon, but it was also, and it'll always be, it was yesterday, it was now. It lives inside you. I've always got a connection to that point in time. So I'm 56 years old. My measure of time is it's 16 years since we lost mum.
Yeah, yeah. I hear you.
Because that's the black hole in the middle of it, and I literally now refer to life before and life after. Um, and my sense of time before isn't brilliant, if I'm honest. My sense of time around there is gone, um, and it's my measure of time afterwards. Um, so yeah, I think there are times when I'm a little bit too comfortable talking about how we lost mum because we lost her in horrific circumstances. Um, I also think there are times when I don't talk about it enough because domestic violence and murder by somebody you love that's the it's a massive issue all over the world, but a massive issue in the UK.
Imagine.
Um, but yeah, it becomes a defining thing. But that was part of my recovery of realizing that however much I loved her and whatever I felt about what happened in that time, it has to become a part of you, not all of you. And I think if any grief is like that. There are stages and processes to it, but for a long while it looked like it would swallow me. And I think my recovery is the journey away from that being my defining point to a defining point, if that makes sense.
I agree. Yes, absolutely. And that's a brilliant way to explain it. But I'm like, when you bring up the guilt you felt or still feel about the fact that you couldn't do anything at the time, and of course that's true. But I mean, like, how do you, when did you, I guess you wrote the book, you created the charity, you're doing all this stuff to kind of honor her, I guess. And like, when did you finally learn to put the guilt down, Kelvin?
Um,
Because that's
it
not
took a
your guilt.
long,
That's not your guilt to carry around.
yeah, it took a long time. I was raised in a house of violence, um, and that isn't the answer. I've been involved in mental health for a long time. So initially, the easy anger was being angry that I hadn't removed him from our life, whatever horrible way we want to think of that. That I hadn't just picked him up and shook him. Yeah, there was an element of just disbelief that somebody could do that to my mother.
Yes.
But actually, the longer guilt was that we'd reached a point where I thought she couldn't have that conversation with me. But actually, I know enough about domestic violence now to know there were 102 other factors in there, but you don't see that at the time. You see your role in the situation. So part of my recovery was making sure I'm always the person you can have that conversation with. I genuinely don't know if we have them in Canada, but the Samaritans, are you familiar with who they are? We're a
Well, yeah, when you hear the term Good Samaritan, I guess
so,
that, but I don't know about the group. No.
so I think they might be called befrienders in America, but it's a suicide awareness charity, so people can ring us in. And I volunteered for them before I lost my mum, and I volunteered for them again afterwards because I want to make sure there is somebody at the other end of the phone to have that conversation. I try and be an advocate for it that it's not going to be great, but have the conversation. And it's a foundational part of the charity. So I think, and you'll know this, Brandon, with your wonderful work you do, but the only way I think I can honour my mum moving forward is to be my best mate, is to be the son I
Yeah.
think she hoped she'd raise. So that's the charity, but that's how I conduct myself in life. I hope it's the hope and the space I give to other people. So our charity isn't about taking you up mountains, or it's about finding a space where you can have that talk, you can meet people, you can understand you're not on your own. The fact that all of that happens outdoors and sometimes involves a mountain is great, and I think makes it more effective. But I think what we do is provide space for people to be able to have that conversation.
It's incredible. Yeah, I mean, and I've said this before about my podcast. I no longer need to talk to a psychologist. I've invented my own therapy by creating this podcast. So
Yeah.
I'll be okay until next week. Um, I
That's a
think
fantastic way to look at it. But
and I don't have to pay for it really. Well, you guys get like a packet, a swag pack, but that's it. I no longer have to pay $200 for an hour of therapy.
yeah, well, I mean, bearing in mind the costs you guys face, this will put a smile on your face. But I was speaking to somebody this morning on a walk and talk session, but one of our stakeholders, our partners, from the NHS, and they were sort of saying, about the therapeutic benefit of time outside. As well, in our health system, if you got given therapy, it would start with a 45-minute assessment, and then you'd get 6 30-minute sessions. That's the standard UK package. So that's 3 hours 45. We're about halfway round a walk at that point, and you're starting to realize that you might be able to trust me or the other person on the walk. You don't have to make eye contact with me. I'm not going to sit you on a couch or. So I personally think for a lot of, not for everybody, some people want to sit on a couch. I appreciate that, but I think it offers people the space to find their time and come back. And we don't have a you're welcome on one walk. You're welcome on as many walks as you can attend. So actually, a bit like you, people find they found their own therapy, which tends to actually be other people.
Yeah, and I'm hoping that, with as many, we now have 60 subscribers, Kelvin.
Hey,
Yeah,
that's a
so
start.
60 real people are listening to this, or will be listening to this. Let's get into something else. I mean, like we've been up and down this roller coaster a few times
Yeah.
already, and then we've only talked for a couple of minutes. Let's unpack walking out of the dark. It seems I still haven't read it. I'm going to pick it up. Of course, I am a self-help junkie, a
Yeah.
pop psychology junkie. It seems to be a lot of how you cope and deal with fear. And can you work with the idea of fear not deciding for us? I think you've already answered the question with your climbing, but um, how do you not let fear decide, Kelvin?
So there's a wonderful little acronym. I don't know if you've heard it before. We use it a lot in climbing. Fear is just false evidence appearing real.
Yes.
So actually, what is the basis for this? Yeah. So the most common thing I'll hear is, "Yeah, I'm going to fall off the mountain." Well, you're probably not. There are ropes involved and safety equipment and good climbers, so that's not true. So you know, and before I pull on a hold, I'm going to give it a little test. So it's not loose. I'm not worried. Yeah. So those little breakdowns of things, I think they're the first way. But I'd like to think the book's a book about hope. And I didn't know that when I wrote it. I absolutely didn't. And the book starts angry, and I always feel I should give people. I don't like the phrase trigger warning, but contact warning. That the book covers some very dark ground. You and I are talking now, so we know there's a happy ending. Yeah, so I'm very
Yes.
and
Yes. The absolutely.
I'm ruining nothing when I say this. I say this in the foreword. Yeah, I don't like other people's rules. I think that probably a lot of people who started with a bad starting childhood are that way. Climbing's taught me to make my own rules. So I tell people right at the start, I'm going to tell you the end of the book. There is a happy ending because we've got to get through some dark stuff to get there. Um, but yeah, I think I've written a book about hope. I think I've written a love story, if I'm
Yeah, I was
honest.
going to get to that.
Um,
What? Let's get into the love story element.
um, so I don't want to be rude to any of our 60 listeners, which is really 600 because people rewatch stuff later. But I don't want to be rude about anybody's faith or belief or whatever. I'm certainly rude about some aspects of faith in the book in my angry phase. But what I came to realize is actually, I think I do have a faith. I'd lost it for a while, but I found it again. And my faith is in other people. So I think going to the mountains kept me alive. I think it gave me the strength. It perhaps gave me my strength before I'd lost mum, that was part of who I was. But I didn't
You
start
had
to
that
recover.
foundation, which lucky enough.
Yeah, yeah. But I don't think I started to recover till I started speaking to people. And I thought people would judge me. They'd judge me the way I was judging myself, like most of us judge ourselves. And they didn't. I thought I was going to tell them this awful thing about what happened to my mum and how that was in part my fault. And they didn't. People picked me up off the ground. I've got a friend out in the Alps, little Gary, and he's little. Yeah, he literally lifted me off the ground with a hug and said, "None of this is you. None of it." And that was the reaction I got from everybody. And I thought about it and I thought, maybe they've been driven by their faith. I can absolutely appreciate that. But when stuff's been really bad, somebody has picked me up and said it'll be okay. When I've felt lost, somebody's been my light and said, you know, I'll guide you home. So I realized that actually I think it's a book about love. And that's sort of the subtext of it, of how I learned to
And
love life.
it's not like it's not romantic love. It's just basically love of, you know, love of having your faith rekindled, I guess.
Yeah, and actually love of, literally love of life again. That I see a future that I want. I find the joy in things. I still reach for the phone to tell my mum about stuff that I'm never going to be able to do.
That's a funny
Yeah,
one, eh?
that I don't think that goes away.
Yeah. You wake up some days with something to tell them, and you're like, oh man.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I realised, in my latter life, I worked out I wanted my scars to be on the outside, so I don't know that a camera would pick this up. But I've got words tattooed down the inside of my arms, and I don't mind people knowing at all. And the ones on this arm say, "I carry you in your heart, in my heart, and it's your love that makes me strong." And initially, that was about my wife, who's in the other room, and my mum. I realized it's not. It's about people. That's kind of become my philosophy of stuff. And then every so often, my mum was 57 when she died, which is young in
Real.
any way of how you die. Um, and I'll see stuff and I'll realize, yeah, my mum gets to see that through me. Yeah, that's the gift of biology and faith, I guess.
Yeah,
But
the
yeah,
spirit world.
yeah, and I would strongly suspect I chatter to my mum as much nowadays as I did when she was with us, just in a
Yeah.
different way. Um, but that comes from my faith in time with people. Yeah, I'm just back from a climbing trip, and other climbers will say, "What did you climb?" And that's not the thing. For me, I've had some quality time with one of my oldest friends. The
Nice.
fact that the thing that bonds us together is climbing, and we climb some fun stuff, great. But actually, it's the who I was with that matters. Um, and yeah, that's one of the gifts that's come from losing my mum that I've learned, perhaps late in
You,
life, but I've learned that value.
yeah, appreciating people a lot more than you used to, for sure.
Yeah,
I
and appreciating the subtle ways people are there. It's not about people being at your deathbed or picking you up when it might just be a hand on your back. It might just be I have a Swedish friend or a British friend who's lived in Sweden for long enough to feel she's Swedish. And she told me the most fabulous phrase. When people say there are no words, she said, there are always words. Just sometimes you say them with a hug. Oh,
it's a really
that's
nice one.
fantastic.
That's
Yeah.
cute. I could see that on a t-shirt. Did you learn anything you didn't know about yourself after writing Walking Out of the Dark? We already brought
um,
faith up, but I guess that's the cure-all, really. I think faith, for me, even that word, my stepfather was a fatalist at heart, and um, he wasn't God, and it wasn't a Christ figure or anybody like that. It was just that he had faith, and he knew there was something, but he didn't
yeah.
really know what it was. But how did walking out of the dark, how did that change you? I mean, we've already answered it, like, but it's just, yeah,
Well, I guess, I mean, and it's sort of where the town traveling chapter sort of came in that it's kind of easy to understand how losing my mum has shaped and I hope not defined, but has shaped, influenced whatever life since that point. But actually, it's come to define quite a lot of life before we lost her. You know, it. There was certainly a point where I would say, decades ago now, when I was a young man, that I was angry at my mum about how I was raised, that my stepfather got to do that stuff. Um, but actually, the marching of time, I've realised that the same stuff was happening to her, and there were just days she wasn't strong enough because there are days none of us are strong enough to stop it. And there were probably days where she knew I was strong enough to get back up afterwards. Um, so it defined some of the time before, which then actually helped me make my peace with some of it.
wow,
Um, there was a while where I was perhaps angry at the world that it wasn't a massive thing to everybody else. But actually, I lost my mum in horrific circumstances. That shouldn't be a big thing in other people's lives. They should have empathy and sympathy, yes, but it shouldn't define everything. And I think that made me more empathetic towards other people because we just don't know. How many thousands of people have seen me
yeah.
on a stage or walked past me and not known? But I do that to people every day.
One of the gifts you receive from all of this is empathy.
Yeah, in bucket loads.
Yeah,
Because you just can't conceivably know. Another T-shirt slogan for you, but somebody that I know who works in mental health said, his favourite phrase is "It's never this," because there'll be a little bit in your head where somebody's telling you a thing and you're thinking, "Really?" It's never this. It's the combination of
that's a good
everything.
one.
Yeah, um, and yeah, that for me that massively came from writing the book of realizing actually this is a path. Um, we don't always know where it's going, but there's a direct link between my childhood and how we lost my mum, but also who I am today.
and not knowing the path leaves room for many pleasant surprises.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
that's
because if
how
we
that's.
accept we can't know it, we can't really know where it's going. So if we're
I
in
think we
a
do. I think we do, and I think that's why we take the journey, Kelvin. We know
yeah,
it's
yeah, that's
we like most people. It's gonna work out. Um,
yeah,
like I mean, you know, it's a funny world universe we live in, but I mean, I kind of agree that um, we choose our path. We choose the people we come down here to be with.
yeah.
We meet new spirits each time. But yeah, and so very often our paths are fraught with tragedy. But let's get back to you. You've climbed mountains, you've built businesses, you've written books, you've created a charity. What are you still afraid of?
That's a good question.
I wanted to ask that of you because
Yeah,
I see you now as a person as opposed to a LinkedIn profile or someone with a biography face to face and with your voice. There doesn't seem to be much in my opinion, that you're afraid of.
yeah. I mean, I know I'm supposed to have an answer for this.
You don't need
Um,
one.
I'm not a huge fan of snakes, but fortunately, that's not a big deal in the UK.
Okay, snakes
Um,
is on the list.
yeah. Um, I worry about the charity not succeeding. It's a really hard landscape for charities in the UK. I'm sure it is everywhere, but I only know the UK because that's my legacy. But equally, there's all the excitement of that. Of we've built a thing that isn't me anymore. It's if you'd come out with a charity 3 years ago,
It's
you'd go on a
beyond
walk
you
with me.
now. Yeah.
Yeah, there's 100 volunteers now. If you went on a walk with us last year, chances are slim that you met me. Um, which is a
Wow.
little bit sad for me, but is great for the
No,
charity.
that's an
Um,
amazing turnaround for the company itself is to have the creator to be a bit anonymous.
yeah, yeah. So I think I'm building a thing that will last. So that worry recedes a little bit. But yeah, we joked about fear before, but there's a little truth for good mountaineers, and I'm sure there are exceptional mountaineers. The Alex Honolds of this world, the guy who climbs the big faces on his own.
Okay.
Um, but I don't climb with people who have no fear of heights because if you really aren't bothered by this, you're probably not going to bother with the safety stuff. So a little bit of fear, a little bit of worry about the charity, a little bit of making sure you look left and right when you cross the road. I think keeping that in you is good. But as anybody who's been through trauma and hopefully come out on their feet on the other side of it knows, one of the things it's hard to put into words is you kind of learn you can cope. So back to that black hole in the middle of everything. Every so often, if stuff's really tough, I think this isn't the toughest thing you've been through. It just isn't.
Yeah,
So
that's one of the best ways to coach somebody up the mountain is this isn't the toughest thing you've ever been through.
yeah, yeah, exactly that. It's probably not the toughest thing you're gonna go through. It's so actually put it in, and the worst case, halfway up the mountain, the view is still really really good.
Yeah.
Sit down, take the win, come back next time.
Let's button this up. And I want to just end on this has been an amazing conversation. And I'm saying every time I interview somebody, and this is happening every single time, I get more out of the situation and become more driven to be snackable mental health itself and the evolution of it is the interview aspects and everything like that.
Yeah.
I want to bring up walking out of the dark. What would be, in discovering your ways out of the dark, what would be the next step for someone that you meet who is still in the dark. And I think, we've already I drew up all these questions. I'm like, I'm gonna ask him this. I'm gonna try and guide the conversation this way. But it seems like we've already in turn answered without me even needing cues. Yeah. What is some final advice you would give to somebody who is still in the dark? And this is a good
Um,
question for me because this is going to help my therapy again, Kelvin. So,
um, I think it's the yeah, and I'm gonna go a little bit English on you here with our weather and our weather that's not normally like this. Is there's a little secret people lose sight of it, even in the middle of the darkest storm, cloudy sky, the stars are still there. Now that sounds really facetious
no,
and
no.
easy, but they are, and they don't need to be that bright. So you can buy 1,000 lumen torch in your supermarket this week. I promise you, in the middle of the night, it just takes one candle, one tiny little candle, and that can be unbelievably hard to see. But if you can just remember the concept of it being there, I think that's the first start of finding your way.
Ladies and gentlemen, Kelvin James, can I have you on again in 6 months? If I
You
if I don't
absolutely,
make it to England first and go climbing with you,
you
I'm
absolutely can.
I'm doing my best to lose weight so I don't have to carry all of this 250 pounds with my fingers. So much love, my man, and all the best over the next little while. And I will be sending you a swag pack. Snackable Mental Health, Kelvin James, everybody. Thank you so much, Brandon W. Hahn. We will
Thank you
talk.
so much.
We will talk very soon, my man. Thanks so much.
Brilliant. Take care. Lovely to meet you.
All right, take care. Bye bye.